we're about to hear another Drake diss on the way, but then the OG had to make a call, and the OG I'm referring to is Jay Prince. Now, for those of you guys who are not familiar with that name, Jay Prince is the founder of Rap A Lot Records, and one of the biggest artists that they had on that label was, of course, Scarface, and that label was very influential in building up Southern hip hop, and he was also one of the first moguls within hip hop. It was him, Russell Simmons, you name it, right? So he has a relationship with Drake because his son, Jazz Prince, was the one who first introduced Drake to Lil Wayne, and as you know, the rest is history. So he basically made a phone call to him in his words and said to him to not respond to Push's track or anything else like it, because he said that, you know, when the pigs wrestle with hogs and they themselves become a hog, and then everything gets messy and muddy. Something like that. Look up the interviews. He said it on like 4 or 5 different interviews, basically saying that, you know, his image will be tarnished and it'll get ugly if he continues on this, you know, parade of insults and disses, and it might affect his branding and his imaging and what have you. I find this very interesting that he is now reaching out to Drake to end the beef and get it where it stands, because for those of you who don't know as well, not only is he kind of like a surrogate mentor in a sense, but he's also selling a book right now. He's basically in the middle of a book tour, and he's kind of using, you know, his leverage with Drake and, you know, his standing with him to kind of sell a book as well. Now, I'm not saying that he's, you know, solely an opportunist, only looking out for his own pockets. Like, I'm sure he means well and what have you, and I'm sure he's been somewhat of a mentor to Drake over the last 10 years or so. But at the same time, I find it very timely of him to put an end to the beef, all the meanwhile selling a book, or on the way of selling a book as well. It's a little opportunistic, to say the least, if you ask me. Because this is my thing right here. If you really felt this way about, you know, Drake's branding and imaging and what have you, then where were you during his beef with Meek Mill? Where were you during his beef with Joe Budden? Mind you, he had a couple subliminals for Joe Budden. It wasn't really that serious. Where were you when he had his beef with Common back in 2011? Nowhere to be found. Where over yonder? You know what I mean? Or even the Kendrick situation. Like, again, like, Drake didn't really have any shots for Kendrick at that time, but again, where were you? Like, Drake has had a verbal skirmish with more than a number of rappers, whether it's from our generation or this current generation or from a past generation. So why is it now that he's having issues with Pusha T that you want to come and intervene and play the role of referee now? And, you know, to me, it just kind of comes down to the fact that A, you're selling the book, and B, this may not be fact. This is more open to interpretation. This is more subjective. Maybe he thought that Drake was losing the battle and thought that he couldn't continue on and say, you know what, dead it. But then again, there were reports of him saying how he may or may not have heard, you know, the record that Drake had in store for Pusha, and how that could have ended Pusha's career or whatever the case may be. Either way, this is hip-hop. Let it continue. Now, unless if it's under dire circumstances, i.e. Biggie and Tupac, why not let it continue? Like, why do you have to throw in the towel? Like, no one's getting beaten to death right now. This was arguably the best battle that hip-hop has seen in the last 13 years. The last one I can think of that was even, like, noteworthy was The Game versus G-Unit, and how he just slaughtered everyone in G-Unit with the record. Everyone tried to come back with their record, but it wasn't enough. Game was ready to go to war. Literally, actually, because I remember there was a shootout during in 2005 between his camp and 50's camp outside of Hot 97. But anyways, that's besides the point. Why let it stop? Let it keep going. Like, both of these rappers are sensible. Like Pusha's like 41. Drake is in his early 30s. These guys both have like their own families to worry about. They have their own branding to worry about and what have you. Like, no one is going to get killed over this. And I can only assume that both their entourages are very knowledgeable in that regard as well. He also said he saw it going down a path where it was going to get personal and violent and all that. Like, can't all that. I don't believe that even for a second. And yes, they were going personal. I will say that. Drake mentioned, you know, Virginia Williams. He didn't mention her in a disrespectful way. He just mentioned her in general. And then Pusha mentioned, you know, the mother of his child, and also his child mentioned his mother and father, etc., etc. I mean, if you thought he was being disrespectful, Pusha, then why not make a call to Pusha T and say, hey, end it now? You know what I mean? Because now we'll never get to hear the response that Drake had ready. We will never know if it was spicy or if it wasn't. And that's one thing that got taken away from us that we shouldn't have had taken away from us. This is like watching an NBA Finals game and there is a blown call by the referee and it should have gone in the way of Team A, but they got the penalty instead. This is what it feels like right now. And on top of that, you're going to have the Drake naysayers who are going to say, oh, well, he was going to get bodied anyway because he got bodied right there and then. Don't get me wrong, the story of Adidon was a very scathing diss track, but at the end of the day, we never got to hear what Drake's response would have been. It's just very, it's very frustrating because it kind of makes Drake look like a punk now. Because essentially you have your surrogate father in the music industry kind of take you out of the playground, grab you by your arm because he feels like the schoolyard bully is about to give you an ass whooping. And then your dad comes in and says, no, we're going, you've lost. I'm throwing in the towel right now. This is Ivan Drago all over again. Let's go. And that's not fair because Drake still had a shot in my eyes. And I just feel like when it comes to Drake in particular, he gets the goalpost move from him very often. Drake is not my favorite artist. I've been critical of him in the past. I am a fan of his overall. I do enjoy his music. I feel like he could do some things better with his music, but I understand the method behind his music, business-wise and what have you, so I get it. But I just feel like the goalpost is always moved for him further out, whereas with other artists, it gets shrinked in. And it's funny because one of the examples I have is the example of the photo of him in blackface from like over 10 years ago. He put out a statement in regards to that. Not only did he do that, but other people who know him put out a statement in regards to that as well. David Reyes, I think is his name, the photographer who took the photos. Also, Lupe Fiasco gave his own interpretation of what those photos meant. And despite all of that context, people still weren't buying it. But the joke is, and there's two jokes actually, the joke is, you have Jay-Z who put out the story of OJ, and it was a video of him in blackface. It was a caricature of himself in blackface. There's also a caricature of Nina Simone in blackface, which you would think is disrespectful, but it was an art piece. It was meant to invoke satire about what black people are viewed as by society, no matter what social class they belong to, and that was brilliant. And in Drake's scenario, he was talking about the inequality that black actors face every day whenever they're trying to get roles, whether they're light skin or dark skin. And despite that, people are saying, no, Drake's a coon. But then when it's Jay-Z, it's like, oh, he had a bigger message behind it. Oh, I respect it. Now, I get it, Jay-Z's an OG in the game. His status is no question. But at the end of the day, it's still the same political statement. And the joke is, with Jay-Z, that statement was made only a year ago. With Drake, it was made a decade ago, meaning that he has had this consciousness within himself. Now, a lot of people are going to argue, oh, well, how come he doesn't put that in his music often? Why does he do that in his music? He doesn't have to do that in his music. Like, just because you're a black artist doesn't mean you have to be a conscious artist. That doesn't have to be your brand as an artist. Like, if you're like a party rapper or whatever, but then like you have conscious views outside of music, that's totally fine. Not everyone has to be a conscious rapper. And it's so unfair for people to expect that of him based on these photos that were taken well over 10 years ago. And this is while he was more so into acting than rapping. Like, mind you, he was probably like maybe two mixtapes deep at that point, but the acting career was still in full effect. Like, he was doing both at the same time. This is before Lil Wayne, mind you. So I just don't understand why the goalpost is moved for him and certain things are expected of him when he's not within that type of ilk. And the second joke to this, like I alluded to, is the fact that Pusha T is claiming him to be a coon and not respecting his black side enough and being a sellout and what have you. Yet Pusha T, for about 17 years now, for as far as we've known, because they first linked up with Pharrell in 1997, but we know how the story goes. The joke is when it comes to Pusha T, he wants to talk about cooning and selling out people, but the man has made records for 17 years about selling drugs and all sorts of poison to people within his own community. whether it's real or fake, that has been the stories that he has been selling for 17 years. Talking about he sold dope in Virginia and all over America, how he hired hitmen to execute this person and that person. The man has been giving out confessional tapes for 17 years about how he did dirty to his own people. Yet people, based off of this little war of words between the two rappers, are seeing Pusha T as the more exonerated individual of the two because he's a quote-unquote real nigga. Because he talks about that street shit. That street shit is what got your auntie hooked up on heroin, bro. And you want to talk about this guy being some sort of revolutionary hero, talking about how he's for the people just because he has more of an underground aesthetic, whereas Drake is more of a mainstream appeal? Come on, bro. And this is a problem that I have with some black people. Not all black people, some black people. And I had a conversation with one of my boys about this the other day. And it's that they value, when it comes to black culture, they value the struggle. They don't value the rise. So unless if it's someone that has a certain amount of clout, like a Jay-Z, for example, then they'll respect the hustle and the rise in the form of black excellence. But for certain people, they just don't acknowledge it at all. Like at the end of the day, when it comes to black people, we have been at the bottom of the gutter for so long, and the whole idea is to move up from that struggle. We can't be keeping it real or being posted up on the block in the hood forever. Like, it's okay to be black and middle class at the same time. There is nothing wrong with that. But for whatever reason, in some aspects of black culture, they will dictate to you that in order to be considered a real nigga, you have to be in the lower class. You have to be in the lower echelon. You got to be in the gutter, the bottom of the bottom. You got to be hood. That is what blackness is all about. No, that's not all of what blackness is all about. And what I hate about this hood mentality is the fact that a lot of people think that being from the hood is a badge of honor, in the sense that you get to glorify about all the nefarious activity that happens within the hood, whether it's drug dealing, pimping women out, gang banging, gun violence, etc., etc. People glorify the hell out of that shit. What they should be glorifying is the ability to empower your community through aid, through education, through systemic rebuilding of your community so it can be better, so it doesn't have to be a cesspool filled with violence and drugs and whatever you can think of. That should be what should be glorified within the hood, not yo, I shot a man last night and he was beaking at me the wrong way. No. So whenever people say, oh, Drake ain't hood enough, or he ain't from the hood, or he doesn't know what it's like to struggle, or he's light skinned so he's got privilege, it's like you are basically negating the fact that Drake is an individual of the black community who actually had his own struggles. May not have been financial struggles, the type of financial struggles that you want to hear about, but he's had his own struggles nonetheless that he's had to deal with. Like, the man grew up without a father, and he grew up not knowing what his identity was at one point in time, because yes, on one end, he grew up in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood with his Jewish mother, and he was taught more on his Jewish side of the family. And then he wanted a sense of belonging, so he hung out with the black people on the east end of Toronto. I mean, you can't blame the guy for wanting to find himself in different avenues of life. So I feel like people really need to back off of Drake when it comes to that, because it's not fair. Like, you're moving the goalposts for him, and people will deny the fact that he came with some heat on Duppy, but because he's light-skinned, because he's from the upper middle class, ever since, the Degrassi days or whatever, they will hold everything back against this dude just so they can cheer for the other guy, because the other guy is a real nigga. And I hate the fact that, in hip-hop, if you are light-skinned or you're biracial, you have to be conscious, or you have to be uber conscious or something like that. You have to be 10 times more conscious than someone who's dark-skinned. And the joke is, if there's somebody out there who is dark-skinned, they can be as ignorant as they want to be. And that's a sad thing about it. They could be like Kodak Black, or 21 Savage, or Soulja Boy, Rick Ross. They can cool it up to the 10th degree, but no one will say nothing. You know why? Because the bar is set so low for people of a darker pigment that they can just get away with bullshit, and that is their standard, and that's the sad thing about it. That's what really boils down to in this little war of words between the two. And it sucks. It really sucks for Drake and people who are kind of in Drake's ilk, so to speak. So, kind of bringing it back full circle, I wish Jay Prince didn't intervene in this. I wish he would have let Drake respond with this record. And I guess because Drake has that much profound respect for Jay Prince, he's gonna, put it on standby at the very least for now. But with that said, I hope Pusha T doesn't give him like a sucker punch, so to speak, and put out another diss record knowing that Drake got the OG call from the big homie saying not to do it. Because that would be unfair, that would be selfish on his part, and that would be a sneak move. But the joke is, so many people would applaud him for it because of their hate for Drake, because they hate Drake that much. They hate Drake like they hate the Golden State Warriors, man. And Drake, in their eyes, is Stephen Curry. But hey, what are you going to do? Either way, do you guys agree? Do you disagree? Let me know what your thoughts are. Hit me up on Twitter at CoolRadioCC and share your thoughts. Cool!